In 1872, a man by the name of Robert A. Johnson became the first homesteader of Sumas. Johnson thought that Sumas would become a town due to the hope of a railroad crossing between the U.S. and Canada, but he ended up living alone for about 10 years. By 1889, Seattle Lakeshore / Eastern and Bellingham Bay and British Columbia railroads had established crossings in Sumas. Both railroads had safe bridges over the Nooksack, which was a pretty big deal back in that time. By 1892, 2,500 people lived in Sumas due to the timber mills and logging camps. By 1893, however, the timber industry had collapsed and only about 500 people remained. Thankfully for Johnson, all hope was not lost, and by 1897, when the Lone Jack mine was found, the city became a boom overnight. This time, instead of timber, they were after gold. Most prospectors rode the train to Sumas where then they would leave again. Most of these people came from towns like Whatcom or from Canada. People could get supplies and other necessary needs here in Sumas before heading out on an 18-mile wagon train to Kendall. After Kendall, a primitive road continued to Maple Falls, which was the intersection of the main trail up the Nooksack and the trail to Silver Lake. The crude road up the Nooksack continued until Loop's Inn, which was owned by Albert Loop and his wife. Loop's Inn was located right by the Mount Baker Bible Camp besides Boulder Creek. From there on, everything was moved by human, horse, or mule. Prospectors would continue paralleling the Nooksack until they fjorded the river to McDonald Island, which is no longer there. They would then fjord the river at the end before reaching Cornell's Ranch. Prospectors would continue up the Nooksack until they reached what was originally called Gold Hill and later Shuckson, about where the current DOT station is today. A little further up from Gold Hill, prospectors would reach a second camp, Tent City, which was also the start of the Twin Lakes Trail and the trail to the Lone Jack Mine. In 1888, the town of Glacier was homesteaded by Chester C. Cornell when he discovered coal in the river he named Cornell Creek. In 1904, the Bellingham Bay and British Columbia railroads had extended their lines to reach Cornell's Ranch, which was previously the last outpost of civilization and could only be reached by horse, mule, or foot. In 1909, Albert and Jenny Vaughn claimed a plat which established the town of Glacier, and by 1910, the town had exploded, hosting 2 hotels, a store, post office, candy shop, pool hall, and more. By 1926, there were about 200 or 300 people living in Glacier. Right around 1902, several mining claims were being created upriver towards Nooksack Falls. Multiple mining claims were made, including the actual physical Nooksack Falls, which was originally named Thompson Falls by William Thompson. By the end of 1902, the land was owned by P.B. Cornwall of the Bellingham Bay Improvement Company. At this point, P.B. Cornwall and the Bellingham Bay Improvement Company were starting to build a hydroelectric plant, which was actually the first one in Washington State. They were allowed to put a claim for a hydroelectric plant, but there was much more taxes and payments for that, so they thought, oh, we'll just say that we're mining out here and do all the paperwork for that, but really we'll just build a hydroelectric plant that's going to supply all of Whatcom County with electricity. It ended up being much more expensive than they thought, and then also the government got mad at them, so by 1905, J.J. Donovan, the vice president and manager of the Bellingham Bay Improvement Company, announced the plant was being sold to Stone and Webster of Boston. Stone and Webster actually helped build and design the power plant. The plant is actually still there today, however the buildings and company town are gone. Today the Excelsior campground sits on top of the old site.